Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. This is Shelby with Quest. Thank you for joining us for JD Edwards Week. Our session today is Discover the Easy Way to Make the Orchestrator Work for You, presented by Larry Farino from ACBM Solutions, one of our JD Edwards Week sponsors. I have just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout the presentation. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the questions drop-down box on your GoToWebinar panel. This session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library following this week's event. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Larry to get things started.
Great, thank you, Shelby, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd like to start out by considering the fact that it's very likely that no one woke up this morning and said, I can't wait to open up my computer, log into JDE, and update 1,000 cat codes, or create 300 accrual journal entries, or update 10,000 pricing records, right? Nobody wants to do that kind of work. And so my goal for our session today is to walk through how we can eliminate that kind of work so that we can free up everyone to do more value-added type of tasks, things that management cares about and things that actually add value to our companies. So as Shelby said, my name is Larry Farino. I'm one of the co-founders of ACBM Solutions. We are headquartered in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. We are an Oracle partner, and we are, I believe at this time, the only company that has an Oracle validated integration with the Orchestrator, which is about half of what I'm going to show you on today's call. So very quickly, what we do. I've been a JD Edwards consultant for about 14 years now, and we do offer traditional JD Edwards consulting services, but given that that's such a crowded space, we really focus on Orchestrator, and in particular, we offer training services, so public and private, consulting, or mostly Orchestrator consulting, but again, the traditional JD consulting, and several Orchestrator solutions, including the JDExcelerator, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today. So, very brief agenda. We're going to start with the Orchestrator overview and some high-level groups. I don't want to call them use cases. They're actually like groupings of different types of orchestrations and how they can be used. We're going to do a brief overview of the JDExcelerator and how it works with the Orchestrator. And then we're going to look at some actual Orchestrator use cases and demos and see how those orchestrations are built, how they can work, or how the JDExcelerator can work with them, and simplify everyone's life so that we don't have to do all that manual data entry in JD Edwards. And then finally, at the end, we'll leave some time for questions. So when we talk about the Orchestrator, there are 4.5-ish types of orchestrations that we can create. So now, of course, there's an unlimited number of orchestrations, right? We can create orchestrations that do anything and everything. But when you break it down, there's these categories that we have up here. So the first one is, of course, IoT. And that's how the Orchestrator got started. It was originally the IoT Orchestrator, and it was meant as a receiver of data from IoT devices. And it still does that. A lot of people are using it that way. But throughout the years, the Orchestrator has grown significantly. And we've received functionality that allows us to do all these other things that we see up here. So the next one is application integration, the ability to push and pull data from third-party sources, right? Whether these be external CRM systems, maybe they're internal homegrown systems, it could be directly from databases, or however we get there. We have the tools in our toolbox to go and either push data to these systems, or to pull data from these systems, or to receive data that's sent to us. Then a subset of that is these mobile applications. So now that JD Edwards does no longer support those traditional mobile apps, we need to come up with a way to create our own quickly and easily and do so in the most efficient way possible. And so what we're seeing a lot of people do is build these very rapidly, build and deploy these no-code, low-code mobile apps using something like Oracle's Visual Builder Cloud Service, and take that front-end UI and hook it up to orchestrations and let the orchestrations be that middleware, that piece that interacts with JD Edwards and brings the data back and forth between JDE and our mobile apps. And so we're seeing that emerge as a very significant subclass within this groupings of applications integrations. Next is business process automation. So the ability to let JD Edwards monitor itself, and it's the shift from alert, analyze, act to detect, decide, do, where we can set up orchestrations to detect when something is happening in JD Edwards, decide what needs to be done, and then actually go ahead and do and take the corrective action to fix that in JD Edwards. And then the last piece is the newest piece, is this automated testing platform capability. So starting with tools release 925, we got the assertion framework. And what that allows us to do is to define expected results when we run orchestrations, and then document what those results actually were when we run them with a bunch of different test data and test cases. And so throughout the history of the orchestrator, and as we're looking at how it's changed, we see that there's constant innovation and new ways in which we can leverage the orchestrator for many, many, many use cases inside of each of these different groupings. So I'm going to guess that a lot of you are already somewhat familiar with the orchestrator, but for those of you that are not, I want to take like 3 minutes and just walk through at a high level the different components that are in the orchestrator and how we can combine them to create these orchestrations. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that we have two master components. We have orchestrations and notifications. And the job of the orchestration is to define the inputs of the orchestration, define the outputs of the orchestration, and then define all of the other steps which are built out of these components on the right-hand side, these green subcomponents. There's 12 of them there. We can mix and match them inside of orchestrations, and then the orchestration itself is responsible for defining how we pass data into and out of each step, okay? Now, within these subcomponents, they do very specific things. So form requests are used to define how we interact with interactive applications, right? So any standard or custom interactive application we can get to with a form request. Next, we have data requests, which is what we use typically to pull data out of JD Edwards. This is really using data browser. So if you're using data browser in JDE, a data request in the orchestrator is the exact same thing. And in fact, it uses that same security. So if you're trying to run an orchestration with a data request, and that data request and the user running it doesn't have access to data browser, they're going to get an error. So you have to make sure that when you're running orchestrations with data requests, you do have security to the data browser because it is using that. Next, we have reports, which is really just a way of running any batch application in JDE. We can use those components to pass data selection or processing options into the reports, and then we can take the result of those reports and use them in a future step, such as sending them out in an email or transferring them to an FTP server. We have watch lists, which allow us to get some data from a watch list that exists there in JDE. We have connectors and connections, which kind of go together. So connections is sort of the base piece, right, where we define the URL that we want to connect to, credentials, things like that. And then the connectors are used to define the individual calls, right? So if you were going to do an integration with Salesforce, you would define a connection as your URL and username and password to Salesforce. And then you would set up a connector to get all of the account information, right? Or to write account information back. Every different type of data that you want to read or write to the external system, you would use a connector for. And so not only can you use those connectors for making REST calls like you would with Salesforce or Oracle Sales Cloud or any other cloud application, you can also set up FTP connectors, and you can set up database connectors and use those to read or write to external FTP or database servers. We have custom requests. Custom requests is the only part of the orchestrator that is a developer, I'll call it a developer-only component, right? So we have the ability to write Groovy script or Java, and we also have the ability to call business functions directly with those custom requests. But outside of that, everything else does not require or need a developer. So it really is a business analyst tool, not so much a developer tool. But if we do need a small piece of custom logic, we can ask a developer to write us a 5 or 10 line Groovy script and just inject it into our orchestration, just like any other component. We have messages which allow us to send email out to people. And again, we can attach reports or pass other sort of data into those messages. Then at the bottom row, we have rules, which allow us to add conditional logic. So think of this as like creating a decision tree within your orchestration. If you want that if-then logic, you can set up rules to do that. And you can have rules nested within rules, and you can get down pretty deep in terms of what you're able to do with those rules. We have cross-references, which allow us to map external data to JD Edwards. So again, taking that Salesforce example, if we wanted to map Salesforce account IDs to JD Edwards address numbers, we can use a cross-reference to dynamically map that. And furthermore, the cross-reference is maintained with an application in JD Edwards, so you can actually use a form request to update that cross-reference and make it self-maintaining. It makes it completely dynamic and self-maintaining. So it's a really cool and underutilized component of the orchestrator. We have whitelists, which are really just enable lists. They define what external applications or devices are allowed to send data into JD Edwards. And then lastly, we have schedules, which is, as you would expect, the schedule in which the orchestration or notification would run on once you define it. Okay, so in our trainings, the most common question I always got was, how do end users call orchestrations, right? And so there's a few different ways in which orchestrations can be called. Certainly we have a scheduler, and the scheduler, there is no end user call to the orchestration. The scheduler just runs it when it's time to run it, right? We can have direct REST calls. This is typically done from an external third-party application, right? So Salesforce might call an orchestration to send data over, or I mean, I guess kind of going the other way, not that this is calling the orchestration, but we could do the same thing from within JDE to call Salesforce. But those direct REST calls from an external client, those are sort of originally those were the only two ways you could really call orchestration, since the orchestrator was meant really as an integration and process automation platform, right? So it wasn't meant to be exposed to end users. But then we got form extensions, and form extensions are fantastic. They give us the ability to add a button to a form and hook up an orchestration to that button so that we can then call an orchestration with data on our form, any data that's on the form. And even if it's not on our form, we could use form extensions to expose hidden fields, right? So if there's a field that's in the business view, but that field is hidden, we can expose that field and then use it to input or output data from the orchestration. Or even if it's not in the business view, as long as it's in a table that's part of the business view, we now have the ability to expose that field. And furthermore, while I would say the most common form extension is adding a new button on there, you can actually trigger an orchestration using form extensions on any control that's on JDE, including the find button or the cancel button or the OK or select button. You can hook up an or just even navigating between rows in the grid. You can hook up an orchestration to automatically be triggered when anything happens in a JD Edwards application, and it just happened. You can create these form extensions on the glass very, very easily, very, very quickly. I'm talking like 30 seconds or a minute. You can have a form extension built to call an orchestration and do some really cool and powerful stuff. But what keeps happening is people keep saying, this is great, and we have a lot of use cases for this, right? We have a lot of integrations, we have orchestrations that are on the scheduler, and we have form extensions set up so that users can, we can help make their life easier when they're in JDE. But what if we do want to update 1,000 different category codes, or create 300 different journal entries, or do any of these sort of mass data type of stuff, right? We don't want to go in into each form and row by row keep clicking, you know, a form extension button 100 times or the select button 100 times, right? We need a much faster, more automated way without building custom applications to send all this data. We need an easy way to take data in a very easy to use and user-friendly format and send it all to the orchestrator. And so for that reason, we created the JDExcelerator. So the JDExcelerator, as I mentioned in the beginning, is an Oracle validated integration. So we've gone through that process and passed it, and it is, as I said before, the only Oracle validated integration with the orchestrator as of right now. And what it does is it allows you to enter data in Excel, and with the click of a button, send all of that data to the orchestrator to do something in JDE. And what that something is, I'm going to talk about a little bit more on the next slide. But before I do that, I just want to highlight a couple of the features. And the first one is that it will automatically discover and integrate with all of your existing orchestrations and any new orchestrations. So when you use the JDExcelerator, it is completely integrated with Orchestrator and AIS. And as soon as a new orchestration is created, it is available for you to call and use from within Excel. It has built-in error handling and logging. So when you submit a request to the orchestrator, it doesn't just send it off and then not wait for anything else to happen. It receives the response and will present you with the results if it succeeded. And if it failed, it will tell you exactly what that error message was. Okay. It also has support for header detail type field or type application. So we're going to do a demo for journal entries. That's a great one. We'll also take a look at advanced pricing in a little bit. So those are some of our more popular ones that we see our clients using a lot. And lastly, because we're using the orchestrator, it is automatically inheriting all JDE security and all data validation pretty much for free. So by virtue of the fact that we're using the orchestrator, everything is happening at the application level. And so we're inheriting all of that application security and all the user role security and any other security that you have set up. In addition to that, it respects the UDO view security. So you have to be granted access to view these orchestrations. And on top of that, you have to have the underlying security in JDE to be able to do it. And when you do run this orchestration, it's going to automatically populate all those other fields, even if you don't explicitly specify them in the data that you're sending to the orchestrator. It's still going to populate them in JDE, just like you would if you were calling an orchestration or more well, I guess the other is if you are in JD Edwards and filling out a form, it will fill that data out for you as well. And so the orchestration will do that, and so same as when we pass data from JDExcelerator. And probably most importantly, there's no development required, right? This is an add-in that just sits in Excel and automatically works with any orchestration. So some common uses. By far, the most common use case that we see is uploading and managing master and transactional data. By far. And that's what most of our use cases are today that we're going to look at. We're going to see how can we quickly and easily update a bunch of account master records or update advanced pricing records or things like that, right? Next, we have automating business processes. So we're going to show a demo of being able to help automate your financial close process by calling reports in JD Edwards. So think of calling a balance sheet and income statement and passing in the data selection and processing option for every company or for every business unit or however you want to view your P&Ls, right? you can pass all of that data selection processing options in at one time, click a button, it'll run all of those, attach them to an email, and then email it out to the people that you specify in your Excel data. Very, very cool and very, very powerful use case for using orchestrations and for calling them from Excel. Testing and debugging new orchestrations. A lot of times in the past, this was used by IT to test new orchestrations, right? But again, with the assertion framework, we have the ability to define expected results. And now when we use the JDExcelerator in combination with the assertions, we can feed all of our test cases into the orchestrator from Excel. And when we click that button, we're going to get the results of all of our assertions. We're going to see what the expected values were and what the actual values were, and have that documented in Excel. And of course, it can be saved off into a PDF and given to auditors or anybody else that would need to see that. But we have a way of saving our test data and repeating it as frequently as we need at the push of a button. Very, very, I'd say very, very new and up and coming set of use cases for Orchestrator and for JDExcelerator. Converting and migrating data after an acquisition. We have several customers that do this a lot, and the feedback I keep hearing from them is before we would have had to write custom table conversion programs, and it would have taken us so long to do it, and now they just write in orchestration. They write in orchestration, they get all of the data from the company that they acquired, they push a button, and all of that data is just in JD Edwards. So very, very easy and simple way to get that external data into JDE for those one-time conversions and migrations. And the last one I want to talk about here is executing queries. So this is the data request, right? Being able to, I don't want to sell this as a query tool or a reporting tool, right? It's not that. There are a lot of great tools out there that can be used for that. But if you're looking for a quick and dirty way of getting some data out of JDE just so you could see what's there, so you can make your changes and fix them back in JDE, we have the ability to use those data requests and get that data into Excel very, very quickly, make our changes, and then upload it back into JDE. Okay, so there are a ton of use cases of Orchestrator, and really all of them can be called from JDExcelerator, but I put some common ones up here of what I've seen a lot of our other customers doing. But the ones that I've asterisked are the one that we're going to take a look at today. So we're going to look at the orchestration, and then we're also going to take a look at using it and calling these orchestrations from within JDExcelerator. So the first is GL accounts. We're going to download a bunch of accounts out of JDE, make some changes, and then re-upload them and see how quick and easy it is to do that. We're going to look at uploading journal entries, specifically journal entries with the text attachment. So we'll see how to call orchestrations that not only are they working with form requests or report requests, but they can work with external connectors as well, and use those to work with the attachments in JDE. Financial statements I talked about before a little bit. We're going to call an orchestration that runs a simple balance sheet and simple income statement, passes in the data selection and processing options, as well as an email address to receive the reports after they've been run. Then we're going to look at creating parts, so creating item and item branch records. And then last, we're going to look at updating advanced pricing. And more specifically, we're going to suspend existing pricing lines and add new pricing lines. So let's jump into the demos. The very first one is adding and updating GL master data. So the first part of this, like I said before, is a data request to find all of the GL accounts. So it's actually a separate orchestration, separate from the data request that you see here. But in that orchestration, we're going to simply pass in a business unit object and subsidiary. And when we click a button, we're going to get all of the records from the account master that meet that filter criteria, dropped right into Excel for us. From there, we're going to look at those records, figure out what changes need to be made, as well as add any new records, and then send it back up to this orchestration here, this add update GL master data orchestration. And what's going to happen when this orchestration is called is first it's going to call a data request again, and that data request is going to look and see if that business unit object and subsidiary already exists in JD Edwards. If it does exist, then this rule is going to evaluate to true, and it's going to call our form request to create a brand new account. If it doesn't exist, it's going to call our form request to update an existing account. So let's take a quick look and see how that works in Excel. Okay, so here I am in Excel. Here's my JDExcelerator ribbon. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at my folder menu. By the way, this is using the categories in JDE. So as you assign categories to orchestrations, it will automatically build this tree structure for you based on the UDO type. You can see here there's personal and shared. And based on that UDO type, it'll then use the category within each type to figure out where to go. So I'm going to start with our JDExcelerator demo category here. And I'm going to use our get accounts orchestration. Right, so I select my orchestration, I click create template, and it automatically creates this template for us here in Excel. Again, there is nothing stored locally on my machine. I don't have to build these templates anywhere. It's getting it completely dynamically from the orchestrator itself. So again, as soon as you create an orchestration, it shows up here and can work right out of the box. So I want to get all of the accounts for business unit 200 and object 1110. And when I click call orchestrations, confirm that I want to submit it. Take a second. And here's all of the fields that were returned. Okay, we can see all these are the accounts that currently exist. So I want to add a category code to these, right? I want to go in and update category code 1. So I'm going to leave this here. I could do it in this spreadsheet, but for the sake of the demo, I want to create a separate worksheet. Come over here and I'm going to call on my add update GL accounts. And now I'm going to click create template again. And I want to copy and paste my data from here. So now I have my data in my second sheet to add and update the accounts. And in cat code 1, maybe I want to add CON here and CON here. And I want to add a new row. Let's call it 200, 1110. And we're going to call it ACBM. And ACBM test account level of detail is 7. And I'll put the CON category code on here as well. So I click call orchestrations. We give this a second. And we can see over here the account ID that got updated, because that's what I'm returning back from the orchestration. And we also have this new account. So this is what's coming from that rule that we were just looking at. And you can see that the new account is false on all of them, except for this line right here. And this is the line that I created, right? So naturally, this should be a new account in JD Edwards, and just letting us know, hey, we created this new account because it didn't exist. But all these other ones we updated, but we didn't create a new account for it. So if we take a look in JDE, let's see what those look like there now. So go to the business unit 200, and we'll do account 1110. And sure enough, here's the new account that I created, and the category codes have been populated here. And furthermore, if we come back into JDExcelerator, let's say I want to get rid of this here. And if we rerun the same get accounts orchestration from before, it'll have all of our updates here, right? So we see this new account, this ACBM account. If I scroll over to the cat codes, they're on these records here as well now. So everything got updated in JDE. And furthermore, if I requery it from within Excel, I can see all of our updates happened already in real time. So next, we're going to take a look at our journal entry upload. So in this journal entry upload, we have a form request that's creating a brand new journal entry with multiple lines, right? Because of course the journal entry has to balance. And then after that, we have a connector that's going to take the results of this journal entry and use it to call the AIS server directly and add that text attachment. So let's take a look and see how that works from within Excel. I'm going to come back here again, and then in my JDEx demo folder, I'm going to select Create JE, Create Template. I'm going to call this ACBM Test JE1. Our GL date will be today's date. Oops. I'm going to do a simple cash transfer. So we're going to take $100 here. And then lastly, I want to put my notes. So I'm going to call this ACBM Quest Demo Notes. And let's just create 2 journal entries just so we can see multiple journal entries going in at the same time. So here we're going to call this ACBM Test JE2 to keep it different. And we'll make that test notes too. So now when I click Call Orchestrations, it's going to figure out what kind of data is on each of these rows. Oh, and I got an error here. So not sure what happened. I can take a quick look at the let me refresh the cache and make sure. I was playing around with this earlier. I probably shouldn't have done that right before the demo, but well, it's still errored out. So let me take one look inside our orchestration, see if it's an easy fix. If not, I do have this demo on our YouTube channel, so you can definitely check it out there as well. But let me see if I can. So that's good. And oh, that's my problem right here. I had a different grid name inside of my form request. And that's why that happened. So I'll save that again. Let me come into Excel and refresh my cache. But I guess one good thing about this is that it did show the error message. And so you can see that we are receiving those error messages, handling them, and parsing them out in here as well, whatever we're getting back from the AIS server. So now that I did that, let's try calling this one more time. Beautiful. Okay, so there, it worked. And here's the journal entries that were created. So I'm going to go jump into batch 8674 in JDE, and we'll take a look there. So I'm going to go to batch 8674. And here's our journal entry that got created. If we come in, we can see the 2 lines that are here, right? So it is passing in all those detail lines. And furthermore, if we have an attachment, here's the attachment that got created. And if I open it up, you can see here's my demo notes that got added to it as well. So sorry about that little hiccup that we had there, but you can see how easy it is that once the orchestration was working to send these header detail type data into JDE, including not just the form request data, but also the connector data. Okay, next, we're going to take a look at our financial statements. So this is the one I was talking about where we're going to run a balance sheet, run an income statement, take the results of these 2. Specifically, we're going to take the job number and the execution server that you can see down here. Those are returned automatically when we run a report request. And we can use those to define the attachments that would get sent out on the message. So let's take a look at running this orchestration from Excel. I'm going to come back into my JDEx demo, And here's my financial statements orchestration. As you can see, I have ledger type, company, period, year, and an email address. Okay, so inside here, I want to use ledger type AA. I'm going to do company 200 for period 1 back in 2016 here, so we'll use that, and then I'll put in my email address. Okay. Now I can run it for just this one record, and when I click call orchestrations, it's going to take a little while to run, right? Because these reports, they're not instant. It takes a minute, but it came back, and it came back fairly quickly. But what happens if I wanted to run this for every company, or the example that I'm going to show now, I want to run this for multiple periods, right? So I'm going to run it for all these periods, but I don't want to sit here and wait for it to process each one of these. Because if I have a long running report, let's say I have a report that takes 10 or 20 minutes and I want to run it 100 times, I'll be here all day waiting for it. And plus we risk timeouts and other things. So instead, I want to click on this fire and forget button. And when I click on fire and forget, it does, if you're familiar with the orchestrator, it does exactly what you would expect, because it's the same type of thing. It calls this asynchronously. So I'm going to click this call orchestrations button, and these all got submitted super quickly, right? It's not waiting for the response, but it still kicked everything off and ran it. And if we come into JDE, close that guy. If we come into JDE and refresh our jobs, you'll see here they're all getting run and updating. It's still updating them now, right? There we go. They're all running. So I can open one of these and get the PDF from here, as well as this is what would be emailed. But it's actually running the report, and it's running it as my user in JD Edwards. Okay. Next, let's look at adding the item and item branch record. So kind of like what we saw before in the account, the GL account orchestration, we're going to start with the data request to determine if an item master record already exists. And so that's what this data request is doing. It's checking to see, does the item already exist? If it does already exist, then just add that item branch record. If it doesn't exist, then you got to create the item first, get the item number that was created, and then create the item branch record after it. Okay, so a little more comprehensive than some of the basic ones that we were looking at, right? It's doing a few more things. It's checking to see if it already exists, and if it doesn't exist, it's creating the item, then getting the item number, then creating the item branch record. So let's take a look at that one. Come back into my JDEx demo folder, and we're going to use this add item and branch. So I'll click create template. For the item numbers, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or let's do 1, 2, 3, 4 again. Let's add 2 branches to these guys, right? And then I'm not going to add an item for that last one. So we're going to call this ACBM test item 1. And we'll create test item 2. And then this can be test item 3. Okay, and again, I'm not going to specify an item on this last one. We're going to let JDE assign that one and see what happens in the items that are the data that's returned back to us. For stocking type, I'll put, S for all of these. And for the branch plant, we'll do 10, 20, 10, 20, 10. Okay, so I've got my data filled out here. When I call the orchestration, by the way, it takes a second to do the first one, and then it starts speeding up a lot because it's requesting a token. In other words, it's doing that initial login to JD Edwards, so it takes a little longer to do the first record, but once it has that, it goes through all the rest of them pretty quickly. And just in terms of performance, people ask me all the time, how long does it take to do, X amount of records? And what I say is, depending on the orchestration, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, right? It depends on how your environment is sized and a bunch of other things. But in general, what I see is between 100 and 150 records per minute for something like this. And if we do the fire and forget, it happens way, way faster. We do about 20 records per second. And that's actually a self-imposed restriction. We could make it go faster, but that's sort of what, in our testing, we found to be an optimal speed. So when he's back to here, checking out all the parts that we created, the first result that we get was a new item created. And for the first one, it certainly was. But for the second one, same item number, it wasn't, right? So it was false. And because it was false, we didn't get the new item number information. But for the first one that we did create it returned back the short item number and the second item number for us. Same thing, we have our test item 2. On the first row of that item, it gave us the item info from JDE, but not on the second one. And then the third one, we didn't specify an item number, so our short item number and our second item number are going to be the same in that case, right? But once again, JDE created that for us. If we go take a look in JDE at these, let's check out P4101. And let's see, what did I call it? I call them ACBM test items, so let's put that in the description. So there we go. There's our 3 items, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7, 4, 1, 2, 7, 1. Perfectly matches what we had here in Excel, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 7, 4, 1, 2, 7, 1 was this one that we didn't specify, but we got that back in Excel from the orchestration. So those are our 3 test items. If we come in, again, you see a bunch of information that's filled out. We didn't specify any of this in Excel, right? I didn't put in the inventory cost level or the sales price level or purchase price level, none of that. Orchestrator took care of all of that for us. Again, exactly the same as if we were sitting here in JDE typing all this stuff out manually. So those are the items. Let's go take a look at the item branch records. So that is the P41026. Once again, I'll filter on ACBM. And now here we see the 5 records, right? So we have our 2 item numbers for 1, 2, 3, 4 that created with the 2 different branch plans, one for branch plan 10 and one for 20. We have 2 for 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1 for the 7, 4, 1, 2, 7, 1 that we created as well. And once again, if we come in here, we can see that all of this item branch info is created. And if we needed any of this information to be available for us in Excel, we simply add it to our form request and orchestration, and you could automatically, or you could very easily add that to your, well, it'll automatically be added to your Excel template once you add it to the orchestration, but you could very easily start adding it to your data that you want to use to call the orchestration. Okay, our last one is update advanced pricing, although I think I might have a bonus orchestration for everyone today. But before we do that, we have this update advanced pricing. So this advanced pricing is one of our most popular JDExcelerator orchestrations. And the reason is because prior to 9252, we didn't have an easy way of updating grid rows in JDE unless they had a QBE row. And we need that for advanced pricing. So what we did was we created a Groovy script to figure out what row number we wanted to update. So the way this works is it goes and it looks at that advanced pricing application, gets all of the grid data here, passes it into a Groovy script. That Groovy script parses that grid data. And then, assuming that there's a row to update, it will go in and this form request will suspend the existing line. And then the last thing it'll do is it will go ahead and add a new line to that pricing record. That's what this last form request does. So let's take a look at that. Once again, I'm going to come back to orchestrations. And oh, by the way, I've been using this folder structure because I find it to be a lot easier. But if you're on an older version that doesn't support categories, all of your orchestrations are still listed here and grouped by that UDO group. So you can certainly sift through. I mean, you can see we've written, I mean, this is not all the orchestrations that we've written, but we've certainly written a lot. But I just find it difficult to kind of work with it this way. So I much prefer to use take advantage of those categories that we have and use them to group our orchestrations here. So we're going to click on our update advanced pricing, click create template, and I'm going to fill this out. So this is ADJCON. The item number we're going to update is 7100. Service package is elite. Quantity is 1, and we're going to change the price to 9900. Then we'll do 10, 20. I'm going to do 1000. So 8900, 8400, and 7900. And let's copy these down. So our data is ready to be submitted, but before I do that, I want to point something out in JD Edwards before I actually update this. So let's come check out that pricing data. I'm going to put in JDCON. So you can see we have our 4 records here, right? And here we have the quantities of 1, 10, 20, and 100. But in Excel, I'm using 1, 10, 20, and 1000. So our expectation would be that we're going to expire the first 3 lines, and then this one will just be a brand new line where we won't expire it. So that 100 line will stay in effect. We'll just let that go, right? But all the other lines will get expired, and then we're going to add a brand new one for quantity of 1000. Okay, so let's go ahead and see that. Click Call Orchestrations. And we can see here, there's some information about the rows that we updated, right? But you can see here the row number that we updated. And so we updated the first row, the third row, the fifth row. And these were not first, second, and third because we started adding new rows for each of these, right? So once we added the new row for this one, it inserted a new row. And so now what was previously the second row now became the third row. And for this last one, the row number is 0 because it didn't update anything. So let's go check that out in JDE. I'll click Find again. Sure enough, we have 8 rows. And if I drill into them, you can see that on this first row here, the expire date got updated to today. And then we added a new record with the new price starting effective tomorrow. And same thing for quantity 10, right? Expire today. New record is effective as of tomorrow. Same thing for 20. The 100 record didn't get updated at all because there was no match on the quantity, right? That was one of the criteria about figuring out which row we wanted to update. But this last row of 1000, this didn't exist before. And so we didn't have to expire anything. We're just adding this as a brand new row for anything with quantity over 1000 starting tomorrow. This will be the new pricing record. So again, this is probably on our YouTube channel, our item and item branch video is the most popular, but in terms of what our customers are using, this advanced pricing orchestration is definitely a very popular one for people to use, just because there's not an easy way of doing this in JDE unless you start creating customizations. So I see we have about 10 minutes left, and I know that there are some questions that have been coming in, but I'm going to take a few minutes, and there's a lot of questions coming in. Okay, I'm going to very quickly take a couple, like 2 minutes, and just show one more orchestration here. So this is my bonus orchestration. So back in my JDEx demo, I'm going to click on my Add Address Book orchestration and click Create Template. And this is a very, very basic orchestration, right? There's not a lot going on here. So I'm going to say Larry test customer. Whoops, spelled customer wrong. Larry test employee. Larry test error. So let's just do those 4, and I'll do search types of C, E, Z, and V. Okay, and before I click this, I want to check this assertions box. And so what that's going to do is it's going to let the orchestrator know that we want to check the assertions when we're adding this data. And so when I click Call Orchestrations here, you'll notice right now we only have 2 outputs, but when it gets it back, it starts adding these assertion fields as well. So you can see the first 2 records and the last record were successful, and it's echoing back out the alpha name and the previously assigned number. The third error, or the third row, has an error, and we can see that the description Z is not found in user-defined code 01ST. That's for anyone who's familiar with the UDC tables, you'll know that 01ST is for the search type, and it's just telling us, hey, this is not a valid search type. So I change this back to E, and if I click call orchestrations again, it's going to go and resubmit only this record. So it leaves all the other guys alone, and just the one that had an error we can reprocess. And sure enough, here we get the alpha name back and the address number that JDE assigned. But what I also want to focus on is all these assertion fields that got created. So in our orchestration, I added 2 assertions. One to check the search type. And so this assertion, if we hover over here, it says that it's checking to see if the search type is equal to E. And that is false on the first record, which is a customer, and the last record, which is a vendor. But it's true on our 2 middle records because they were an employee, right, an E search type, and then the error one that I had to change that Z to an E, so then this got true. Then I put in an assertion on the previously assigned number to let us know, was the address number that was assigned greater than 0? And you can see that that was true for all of these. Okay. Furthermore, we have some additional metadata about the assertions. So this tells us how many assertions were evaluated, how many failed, and how many passed for each one of them. So I think the nice thing to take away here is that as more and more people start adopting the assertion framework and using it to define expected results, we can combine that with JDExcelerator, put all of our test data here, save it off in an Excel sheet, and every time we do an upgrade, click a button and let it test all of our applications in JDE and validate that all of the results that are happening are matching what we expect them to, right? This gives us a very easy way to start automating processes that will help simplify and streamline upgrades, as well as data conversions and migrations and a whole host of other use cases as well. And so with that, I am going to open it back up for questions. And Shelby, maybe you can help guide us through some of those questions that have come in.
Yeah, and just before we get started, I know we're a little bit short on time, but just a heads up to everyone, if we don't get through all these questions, I can send the list to Larry and we can follow up to any that we don't get to on here as well. But I will go ahead and start with the first question. What is the minimum Orchestrator release with which this is compatible?
So we actually created it. I said that we built this as part of as a result of the feedback that we got from our training sessions, and that's true. But the very first version of this, I actually built back in Orchestrator 9.155 before there was even a studio as a way to test some of our IoT applications. So we still have versions that will work with that. You just may not have all of the other bells and whistles that you've been able to see in this demo if you're on an older version, but it does work on those old ones as well.
All right. Next question is, what coding language or technology was used to embed orchestration buttons in Excel? So
the JDExcelerator is a proprietary application that we've built. As I mentioned, it's gone through the OVI process, so it is an independent application. We built it during using .NET, the .NET framework, and it's just a standalone Excel add-in.
All right, next question is, does the user running the reports via JDExcelerator need to be already logged into E1?
So the answer to that is no, they just need to be logged into JDExcelerator. And I've seen a couple of other questions come up about this. So I will see if I can get out of here. If I come back into Excel, the user that's being used to call all of these is actually defined up here in our AIS server connection. So in here, you specify your server name and port, as well as the JDE Edwards username and password that you want to use to call all of these things. And if you have SSO, we support that. Well, we support some SSO vendors, but if you have someone else that we're not already supporting, just let us know, and we'll be happy to support that as well. One other thing before we continue with the questions, certainly, if you have questions after this, feel free to reach out to me. But if anyone would like a trial of the JD Accelerator, I'm happy to give anyone on this call a trial of the tool. You can install it. The install takes about 30 seconds. No additional servers or anything like that. It's super easy to install, and we can let you kick the tires with your own orchestrations in your environment. Furthermore, if you like any of the orchestrations that you saw here, I'm happy to give you one of those as well for your trial. And I mean, that's yours to keep no matter what.
Great, thanks, Larry. Next question is, what are some examples of use cases of this for human resources?
There's a lot for human resources. In fact, we have some stuff on our website about that as well. I think one of the common ones is for annual enrollment, updating dependents and benefits, and I've seen people use it for home business units, updating home business units, and a whole host of things. So check out our website. There's a lot there, and I'm happy to have a separate conversation to talk with you about any of the manual processes that you're currently doing in HR. Adding new employees, of course, going through like the quick hire process. All of those things can be automated with an orchestration and called from JD Accelerator.
All right. Next question is, in the advanced pricing demo, did you use Groovy to expire existing pricing records and create new ones with an effective date of tomorrow?
The only thing I used the Groovy for was to figure out which row number to update. And that was because there was no QBE row on that grid. So the only thing the Groovy script did was return a row number. Then I just used a regular form request to expire that record, and then another form request to create the new one. And again, that's on our YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out, subscribe to it. Lots of good content there, and we're always adding new ones. But again, if you're interested in that, send me an email. I'm happy to send you that advanced pricing orchestration, and again, a trial of JD Accelerator if you like.
All right. The next question is, have you ever used this to update processing option values?
So the processing option values, I guess it depends what you're referring to. If it's the processing options on a report request, we can certainly do that like we did with the financial statement orchestration that I showed. If you're talking about updating processing options on an interactive application, that is not something that we've done through Orchestrator yet.
All right. The next question is there a data structure in the output of the orchestrator to retrieve that response in Excel?
Yeah, so the orchestrator is going to return a JSON payload, and the JD Accelerator is able to interpret that. And I will tell you that that is one of the most complicated pieces of the JD Accelerator. I know it's very easy to kind of get something up that just sort of submits data, but being able to interpret the results and get that back, especially with the different variations that exist when you're talking about grid data and form data and other data requests, they're all sort of formatted differently. And when you have these orchestrations that commingle everything, it can become quite complex. I think we support, it's something around like 25 different combinations of output types. So it's not a trivial task to be able to support all of those things for sure. But that's definitely one of the benefits of using a tool like ours, is being able to interpret that response and nicely format it in an easy human readable way.
All right, and we do have quite a few more questions coming in. We'll go ahead and maybe do just a few more, and then like I said, I can follow up with the list afterwards. Someone asked, where can we get the JD Accelerator add-in?
So shoot me an email, and I'm happy to, like I said, let you play around with it for a few weeks and test it out.
All right, next question is, how easy is it to load a new orchestration in the product? Do we need to go to ACBM every time we write a new orchestration?
Nope, it's completely dynamic. As soon as you create an orchestration, it is automatically in Excel. You do not need to come to us or anyone else. It just shows up automatically. It's awesome. I mean, that's the best. That's one of the best parts about it. So, like I said to everybody else, happy to happy to send it to you and let you play around with it and see for yourself. But you definitely don't need to come to us for it. We have a lot of customers that are creating their own orchestrations and just calling them from Excel.
All right, do maybe one more question. Does this have any negative impact on JDE system performance when querying or updating large amounts of data?
It can. It depends. I mean, it's just like calling any other orchestration, right? So, it could. It just depends on what you're trying to do with it.
All right. And if Larry, if that's all right with you, I think we'll call it on questions. Then we still have quite a few more, so I'm not sure how much time we can take up here, but I will follow up with the list of questions and we'll get back to everyone whose questions we didn't get to. We did have a few just asking about the copy of the presentation. So again, this session was recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library as well. So you'll be able to access the recording there after this event ends. But thanks again to everyone who jumped on and attended and asked questions. And thanks again, Larry, for taking the time to present and answer everyone's questions. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you taking the time to check out our presentation. And I look forward to speaking with you in the future.
All right, well, everyone, we do have a few more sessions happening this week and one more today, starting in about 30 minutes. So be sure to go to the JD Edwards Week page on the Quest website and check those out. And we hope to see you on another online learning session soon. Everyone have a great day.